He bought a furry friend and got shocked when an alien girl showed up at his door instead. Welcome to the world of science fiction. Comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Damon Holt had never been the kind of man to seek companionship, much less the artificial kind. But living alone on a mining outpost in the far reaches of the galaxy had a way of wearing down a man's sense of pride. He had spent the last 5 years grinding away on a remote asteroid, extracting valuable ore with nothing but the hum of machinery and the cold, lifeless void as his company. No crew, no friends, just the occasional supply drop, and a long list of regrets that he kept locked away in the recesses of his mind. That was why, on a particularly mind-numbing evening with nothing but the sound of static playing through his comms, he had done something he would have never considered back when he was running with smugglers and mercenaries. He had ordered a furry friend. The ad had been simple. Feeling lonely? Get yourself a genetically engineered companion tailored for loyalty, comfort, and companionship. The holoscreen had flashed images of small, adorable creatures with soft fur and big, soulful eyes, designed to be the perfect pet for isolated workers like himself. The company, Zyrex Biopets, was known for its high-quality bioengineered animals, obedient, affectionate, and low maintenance. Damon had scoffed at the idea at first, but after staring at the blinking cursor in the order form for nearly an hour, he had relented. Maybe it was the silence eating away at him, or maybe it was the fact that he hadn't spoken to another living being in over a month. Either way, he had placed the order, expecting nothing more than a cute distraction to break the monotony of his life. When the crate finally arrived, Damon had been in the middle of recalibrating his drilling system, sweat clinging to his back as he wiped the grease from his hands. He hadn't expected the shipment so soon. Most deliveries to his outpost took weeks, sometimes even months. The supply drones weren't particularly reliable, and he had assumed he'd be waiting at least another cycle before his so-called companion arrived. But there it was, a large reinforced container sitting in the docking bay, stamped with the Zyrex logo and marked Live Cargo in bold red letters. Damon sighed, running a hand through his unkempt brown hair as he approached the crate. "Let's see what all the fuss is about," he muttered, grabbing a crowbar and prying open the reinforced locks. The seal hissed as the internal atmosphere adjusted, and for a brief moment he felt the weight of anticipation settle in his chest. Then the lid swung open, and his heart nearly stopped. Inside the crate wasn't the small, fluffy companion he had been expecting. No soft-furred creature with oversized ears, no genetically engineered pet designed to nuzzle up against him in a manufactured display of affection. Instead, there was a girl. She was curled up in the cramped space, her body tense, her skin pale with an almost iridescent sheen. Her long silver-white hair cascaded around her shoulders in soft waves, her delicate features marred by a single bruise along her temple. Damon's gaze traveled lower, his breath catching when he noticed the unmistakable feline-like traits, pointed, fur-tipped ears twitching, a long tail wrapped around her waist as if shielding herself from whatever horrors had brought her here. And then, as if sensing his presence, she opened her eyes. They were the color of molten gold, luminous and filled with something between confusion and terror. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of the moment pressing down like artificial gravity in a failing ship. Then suddenly, the girl sprang to life with a sharp inhale. She scrambled backward, her hands pressing against the inner walls of the crate as if trying to push herself away from him. Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, but there was no mistaking the fear laced within it. "Who are you?" Damon took an instinctive step back, hands raised slightly in a placating gesture. "Easy there," he said, his voice gruff from disuse. "I was about to ask you the same damn thing." She blinked rapidly, her breathing erratic as her gaze darted around the room. It was clear she had no idea where she was, and judging by the way she was dressed, nothing more than a simple, tattered tunic that barely reached her knees. She hadn't been placed in that crate for her comfort. Something was very, very wrong. Damon clenched his jaw, the old instincts from his smuggling days kicking in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a simple shipping error. Someone had sent her here intentionally, and that meant that whoever had put her in this crate had a damn good reason to want her hidden. He crouched slightly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I don't know how you got here," he said carefully. "I ordered a pet, not a person." His words felt ridiculous even as he said them, and the girl flinched at the mention of the word pet. She swallowed hard, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead as if trying to steady herself. They took me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't remember how, just flashes, bright lights, voices, then nothing." Her fingers curled into fists. "I woke up in the dark in this." Damon exhaled through his nose, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Slavery was illegal in most of the known systems, but that didn't mean it didn't happen. The black market thrived on flesh trafficking, and rare, exotic beings like her would fetch a high price in the right circles. But if she had been intended for sale, why ship her to him? He was a nobody, a man scraping by on the edge of civilization. None of this made sense. But one thing was certain. Whoever had sent her here was going to come looking. He stood, dragging a hand over his face before casting a glance toward the docking bay doors. He had been alone for so long that he had almost forgotten what it was like to have another person standing in the same space as him. But this wasn't just a person. This was a problem, one that could get them both killed if he didn't handle it properly. "All right," he said finally, his voice gruff but steady. "First things first, we need to figure out who the hell you are and who's after you." Girl hesitated for a long moment before speaking again, her voice softer this time, almost fragile. "My name is Lyra," she said, "and if they find me, neither of us will survive." Damon ran a hand through his hair, his mind already moving at a breakneck pace, trying to piece together what the hell he had just gotten himself into. This wasn't supposed to be his problem. He was just a miner, a man trying to stay out of trouble, keeping his head down and making a living in the emptiness of space. The days of running with smugglers, dodging authorities, and dealing with the worst of the galaxy were behind him. At least that was what he had told himself. But now, standing here in the dim light of his outpost, staring at a frightened alien girl who had no business being inside a furry friend shipment, he knew that trouble had found him anyway. Lyra stood uncertainly in the open crate, her fingers twitching as though resisting the urge to bolt. Her feline-like ears flicked at every sound, the hum of machinery, the distant whir of the ventilation system, even the faint crackle of his comms unit. She was alert, coiled like a spring, her golden eyes watching him warily, sizing him up just as much as he was her. She had no reason to trust him, and honestly, he wasn't sure if he trusted her either. This could be some elaborate scam, though he couldn't figure out what the angle would be. No one knew or cared enough about him to drop an exotic girl on his doorstep as some kind of con. No, this was something deeper. He exhaled sharply, moving away from the crate and heading toward the control panel embedded in the wall of his docking bay. His fingers moved quickly over the holographic interface, bringing up the order log. The transaction was simple. Damon Holt, one furry friend, standard model, no custom specifications. The delivery coordinates matched, the credits had been deducted from his account, and the shipping logs all checked out. There was no indication of an error, no evidence that the company had sent him the wrong package. Except he was looking right at it. His jaw tightened. This wasn't a mistake, someone had meant for this to happen. He turned back to Lyra, who had cautiously stepped out of the crate, hugging her arms to herself as if trying to make her presence smaller. There was something about her, something delicate yet fierce, a contradiction that made his gut tighten in a way he didn't like. He had met all sorts of people in his life, scoundrels, bounty hunters, syndicate bosses, con artists, but she was different. "You got a last name?" he asked finally, breaking the tense silence. She hesitated as if considering whether or not to answer. I don't know," she admitted, her voice laced with frustration. "I remember my first name, Lyra, but nothing else. It's all scrambled like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit together." Her tail flicked behind her, betraying her unease. Damon frowned. "You remember being taken?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Not clearly, it's like flashes. I remember being somewhere safe, warm, then everything turned cold. There were voices, but I couldn't see who they belonged to. I think they drugged me." Her hands clenched into fists. "Then nothing, just darkness until now." Damon exhaled through his nose, running scenarios through his head. The most obvious answer was that she had been part of an illegal trafficking ring. The galaxy's underbelly was full of slavers, corporations, and cartels that would pay obscene amounts of credits for rare, exotic beings. The fact that she didn't even remember her own last name made it even more suspicious. Whoever had taken her wanted her mind wiped. Maybe they had planned on selling her as some kind of obedient servant, or even worse, a bioenhanced test subject. The thought made his stomach turn. "I need to check something," he said gruffly, stepping past her and grabbing a handheld bioscanner from his workbench. It was a standard mining tool meant for analyzing ore compositions, but it could also scan for biological anomalies. If Lyra had been genetically modified, drugged, or implanted with anything, the scanner would pick it up. She stiffened when he approached, eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you doing?" "Checking for implants," he said bluntly. "You might have a tracker on you." Lyra's breath caught, and for the first time, true fear flickered across her expression. If she had a tracker embedded in her, then whoever had sent her here already knew where she was. Damon brought the scanner up to her shoulder, letting it run a silent analysis. A second later, the screen flickered, flashing red. His blood went cold. "You've got one," he muttered. Lyra tensed. "Where?" He turned the scanner, following the source of the signal. "Back of your neck. Small, just under the skin. Probably inactive for now, but if someone triggers it remotely, we're screwed." Her hand flew to the spot, her fingers pressing against the soft skin as if she could feel the violation hidden beneath. "Get it out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Damon didn't hesitate. He grabbed his medkit, pulling out a sterilized extraction tool. "Hold still," he said, stepping closer. She swallowed but nodded, tilting her head to the side. He worked quickly, using the fine-tipped instrument to make a tiny incision, carefully extracting the metallic chip embedded beneath the skin. The moment it was free, he dropped it into a containment unit and immediately crushed it under the weight of his boot. Lyra winced but let out a slow breath, her muscles visibly relaxing. "Done," he muttered, wiping his hands on a rag. "If they were tracking you, that should buy us some time." She nodded, rubbing the back of her neck as if trying to erase the sensation of the implant ever having been there. "Thank you," she murmured. Damon didn't answer. He was already thinking ahead, calculating the risks. If she had a tracker, that meant somewhere someone was looking for her. And if they were willing to go through the trouble of wiping her memories and shipping her off in a crate, they wouldn't just let her disappear. His gaze flicked to the docking bay's external monitors. A bad feeling settled in his gut. "Something's not right," he muttered, stepping toward the control panel again. His fingers danced over the interface, pulling up the sector scans. He expected to see nothing but the usual emptiness of space, but instead his stomach clenched. There it was, a ship. It wasn't broadcasting an ID, no transponder, no visible markings, but it was there, hovering just outside his outpost sensor range, a dark shape against the backdrop of the void. "They're here," he said grimly. Lyra stiffened. "Who?" He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Whoever put you in that crate." For the first time since she had arrived, Damon saw something in her golden eyes beyond fear, determination. "I won't go back," she said, voice steady. Damon exhaled, shaking his head. "Then we better get the hell out of here." Damon barely had time to process the weight of the situation before the proximity alert blared through the station, the flashing red lights painting the walls in an ominous glow. The unidentified ship lurking at the edge of the asteroid field had just made its move, cutting through the darkness like a phantom. He cursed under his breath, fingers working rapidly across the control panel as he pulled up a clearer image of the approaching vessel. The hull was sleek, predatory, with no identifiable markings, classic slaver design. Whoever was on board wasn't here for a casual visit. They were hunting, and he had no doubt about their target. Lyra stood behind him, tense and silent, watching the screens with wide, wary eyes. She might not have remembered much about what had happened to her, but she knew enough to understand that she was still in danger. "They found me," she murmured, her voice edged with something dark, something bitter. Damon didn't waste time confirming it. Of course they had. The moment he had pulled that tracker out of her, the signal had gone dead. That kind of sudden silence would have been a neon sign to whoever was looking for her that something had gone wrong. They wouldn't wait around to see if she had simply malfunctioned. They would come in guns blazing, and if they found her here, they'd take her back. He wasn't sure what they had planned for her, but he knew enough about the galaxy's underbelly to guess that it wouldn't be good. His pulse quickened as he pushed off the console, already moving. "We're leaving, now." Lyra hesitated for half a second before nodding sharply, as if coming to the same conclusion. Damon strode across the docking bay, his boots echoing against the metal flooring as he moved toward the Black Arrow, his battered but reliable freighter. It wasn't much to look at, but it was fast, and more importantly, it was armed. He had spent years modifying the ship, adding just enough firepower to keep himself alive when jobs went sideways. He wasn't sure if it would be enough against a full-fledged slaver vessel, but he'd rather take his chances in open space than sit here waiting for them to breach his station and take what they came for. Lyra followed close behind, her breathing steady but deliberate. She moved with an almost unnatural grace, her bare feet silent against the cold metal floor, her golden eyes sharp and scanning every shadow. Damon didn't know much about her kind, but he could tell she wasn't just some helpless victim. There was something feral about the way she carried herself, like a predator trying to decide whether to fight or flee. The Black Arrow's boarding ramp hissed open as Damon's security codes registered, the ship's dim interior flickering to life. He wasted no time making his way to the cockpit, sliding into the pilot's chair with practiced ease. The control panels illuminated under his touch, and the engines rumbled to life beneath them. Lyra took the co-pilot's seat without a word, watching him carefully as he flicked switches and adjusted the throttle. Outside, the enemy ship was getting closer. Damon's jaw tightened as he activated the comms, switching to an encrypted frequency. He wasn't about to open a direct line to whoever the hell was out there, but he needed to know just how bad things were about to get. He scanned the channels, searching for any transmissions, orders, warnings, threats. A few seconds later, the static cleared and a voice crackled through the speakers. "Unknown freighter, power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Do not attempt to flee. This is your only warning." Damon let out a slow, controlled breath. They weren't here to negotiate. He flicked the comms off and turned to Lyra. "They want you alive," he muttered. "That's good news." She shot him a sharp look. "How is that good news?" "Means they won't shoot to kill right away," he said, already punching in coordinates for the closest uncharted hyperspace route. "Gives us a window." The ship vibrated beneath them as the thrusters engaged, the asteroid station shrinking away on the external displays. Damon didn't bother retracting the docking clamps properly. He simply overrode the safety locks and forced the ship free, the mechanical limbs snapping back with an angry hiss of steam. The moment they were untethered, he punched the engines to full. The Black Arrow shot forward just as the slaver ship opened fire. The first blast barely missed them, scorching the side of the station instead. Damon gritted his teeth as he jerked the controls, rolling the freighter into an evasive maneuver. Lyra let out a small gasp as the ship twisted, the artificial gravity struggling to keep up. A second shot tore past them, shaking the hull. "Not the best start," Damon muttered. Lyra grabbed the edges of her seat, her tail curling around her leg. "I thought you said this ship was fast." "It is," he shot back, flipping a switch to divert more power to the engines. "They're just faster." That was a problem. Damon had outflown bounty hunters before, but this wasn't some low-tier syndicate thug in a second-hand gunship. Whoever was after Lyra had money and resources, which meant top-tier tracking systems, precision weaponry, and a ship that could keep up with a freighter trying to make a break for it. He needed an edge fast. He glanced at Lyra. "How good are you at sensing spatial shifts?" She blinked at him, confused. "What?" "You said you remember flashes, yeah. Do you remember anything about flying, navigation, predicting movement?" Lyra frowned, and for a split second, he saw something flicker across her expression. Not confusion, recognition. I think so," she admitted, almost uncertain. "It's more instinct than memory, but—" "Good enough." Damon yanked down the manual Navisyst panel, the screens lighting up with a holographic map of the asteroid belt ahead. "I need you to tell me where to go. You see a path, you call it out. We've got about 30 seconds before they get close enough for a lock, and I'd rather not test my shields against their cannons." Lyra swallowed hard but nodded, her golden eyes scanning the display. For a brief moment she hesitated, and then suddenly her entire posture changed. "Hard left now." Damon didn't question it. He pulled hard on the yoke, sending the ship veering sideways just as another blast screamed past their former position. Lyra's voice was firm now, steady. "Dive down, thread between those two large asteroids." Damon followed her lead, pushing the ship into a steep dive, skimming dangerously close to the jagged surface of a tumbling asteroid. The slaver ship struggled to adjust course, and for the first time, Damon saw their window. He slammed his hand onto the hyperdrive controls. "Hold on." The ship shuddered violently as the black arrow roared into hyperspace, just as the slavers fired again, their shot disappearing into the void behind them as the stars stretched into infinite streaks. Lyra slumped back in her seat, exhaling a shaky breath. Damon smirked despite himself. Not bad for a first flight. Lyra shot him a tired glare but didn't argue. They had escaped for now. But Damon knew this was just the beginning. Whoever was after her wasn't going to stop, and that meant neither could they. The black arrow hurtled through hyperspace, the ship humming with the residual energy of the sudden escape. The streaks of light outside the viewport blurred, stretching endlessly into the abyss, but Damon wasn't celebrating yet. He had gotten them out of immediate danger, but that wasn't the same as being safe. He knew how slavers worked. They weren't just going to give up. That ship had been well-equipped, professional, and expensive. Someone out there had invested a lot of credits into finding Lyra, and that meant they wouldn't stop until they had her back. The only question now is why. Damon exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck as he leaned back in the pilot's chair. The adrenaline was still coursing through his veins, but the danger had passed, for now. He turned his gaze toward Lyra, who sat stiffly in the co-pilot's chair, her hands gripping the armrests with an intensity that betrayed just how shaken she was. She had done well back there, helping them weave through the asteroid field, but now that the immediate threat had passed, the weight of everything was settling over her shoulders. He studied her for a moment, noting the tension in her posture, the way her golden eyes flickered with lingering fear. She wasn't just running on instinct anymore. Now she had time to think, and that wasn't always a good thing. People tended to fall apart once they had a second to process what had just happened. "You all right?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. Lyra blinked as if just now remembering that he was there. She hesitated before nodding slowly. "I think so," she admitted, though her tone lacked conviction. "I don't know, my mind still feels scrambled." Damon wasn't surprised. "Yeah, getting shoved into a shipping crate and chased through deep space will do that." He leaned forward, bracing his elbows against his knees. "Listen, you held your own back there. You helped us get out. That was impressive." Her ears twitched at the compliment, but she didn't seem entirely comforted. "It wasn't skill," she muttered. "It was instinct. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just felt it." Her hands curled into fists. "I don't understand how I know these things, how I knew exactly when to move, where to turn. It's like the knowledge is there, but I don't remember learning it." Damon studied her carefully. That wasn't normal. Even experienced pilots took years to develop an instinct like that, and yet she had moved through the asteroid field like she had done it 1,000 times before. There was something unnatural about it, not forced but almost ingrained, like muscle memory without the memory. He frowned. "You said your memories are scrambled. Do you remember anything from before you were taken?" Lyra's ears flattened slightly and she shifted uncomfortably. "Bits and pieces," she admitted. "Nothing solid, just images, flashes, sounds. I remember being safe. I remember warmth." She closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in frustration. "And then it all goes dark." Damon exhaled through his nose. This was worse than he thought. If her memories were fragmented, someone had done that to her on purpose. Mind wipes weren't uncommon in the darker corners of the galaxy. Slavers, corrupt corporations, and secret organizations all had their reasons for erasing someone's past. The only question was what had been taken from her, and why. He pushed off from his seat, making his way to the ship's data terminal. "All right," he muttered, fingers flying over the control panel. "If you can't remember who you are, we'll have to find out the old-fashioned way." Lyra turned toward him, curiosity flickering in her gaze. "What are you doing?" "Running a genetic scan," Damon said. "I pulled that tracker out of your neck, but that was just one problem. We still don't know who's after you, and we need information." She hesitated. "And you think you'll find it in my DNA?" Damon nodded. "If you were taken from somewhere, your genetic profile might be on record. Medical databases, immigration logs, planetary birth registries. Someone, somewhere had to have recorded you at some point." He pulled up a search algorithm, setting it to scan through classified and black market databases. He had acquired some high-end decryption tools back in his smuggling days, tools that were now proving more useful than he'd like to admit. Lyra was silent for a moment, then finally nodded. "All right," she said softly. Damon activated the scan, watching as the program worked through its queries. It would take some time. He leaned back, arms crossed, his mind still racing. They had narrowly escaped, but that wasn't enough. They needed a destination, a plan. If they kept running without a goal, they'd just be delaying the inevitable. He glanced at Lyra. "Until we get results, we need to figure out our next move. Do you have anyone you might be able to trust?" She shook her head immediately. "No, I don't even know where I come from." Damon sighed. That complicated things. He wasn't the kind of man who played hero, and he sure as hell wasn't in the business of dragging strangers along for the ride. But dumping her somewhere wasn't an option, not when she was being hunted. He had never been the type to care about much beyond his own survival, but something about this, about her, felt different. He didn't have time to think about why. A loud beep from the terminal snapped his attention back to the screen. The search had finished running. Damon's eyes narrowed as he scanned the results. The database had pulled one match, but it wasn't from any public registry or immigration log. It was from a classified research file. His stomach twisted. That wasn't good. "What is it?" Lyra asked, noticing the way his expression darkened. Damon hesitated, then turned the screen so she could see. The file's header displayed a corporate insignia that he recognized all too well: Sexus Industries. Lyra's brows furrowed. "What is that?" Damon clenched his jaw. "A high-level bioengineering firm. They don't deal in normal medical research. They specialize in genetic modification, classified experiments, and military-grade bioenhancements." Lyra's breath caught. "And I'm in their system." Damon nodded grimly. "Yeah, and whatever they were doing to you, it was top secret." He scrolled down, reading the file's brief summary. Most of it was heavily encrypted, but a few words stood out. "Subject 47X, Velaran Hybrid, Project Genesis, status retrieved." Lyra swallowed hard. Retrieved. Damon's stomach sank as the realization hit. They didn't think she was lost. They thought they already had her, which meant the slavers weren't acting alone. Someone else had her first, and someone else wanted her back. Damon exhaled, his grip tightening on the edge of the console. He had just gone from smuggling ore to getting tangled up in something way bigger than himself. But one thing was clear. Lyra wasn't just some random captive. She was part of something much, much bigger. Damon stared at the screen, his mind racing as he processed what he had just uncovered. Sexus Industries. He had heard that name before, though he had always made a point of staying clear of anything even remotely connected to them. They weren't just another corporate giant. They were something much worse. The kind of people who operated in the shadows, conducting experiments no sane governing body would approve, protected by layers of shell companies, corrupt officials, and enough mercenary forces to put small planetary militias to shame. If Lyra's genetic file had been buried in their classified research logs, that meant she wasn't just some runaway slave. She was something valuable. The air in the cockpit felt heavier, the hum of the ship systems droning in the background as the words on the screen burned into his mind. Subject 47X, Velaran Hybrid, Project Genesis, status retrieved. He glanced at Lyra, whose face had paled as she absorbed the information. Her fingers twitched slightly against the armrests of her seat, her tail coiling around her leg in an unconscious display of anxiety. The flickering glow from the screen reflected in her golden eyes, making them look almost ethereal, too bright, too unnatural. She wasn't just anyone. She was engineered. Damon rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. "This just keeps getting worse." Lyra swallowed, her voice quieter than before. Project Genesis, what does that mean? I don't know, Damon admitted, his tone grim. But if Sexus had a file on you, it means you were never supposed to be free in the first place. Her breathing hitched. She didn't speak right away, and for a moment Damon wasn't sure if she would at all. When she finally did, her voice was a whisper, but there was something sharp beneath it, an edge of anger or maybe fear. I don't remember them. She lifted a hand, staring at her fingers as though they belonged to someone else. I don't remember being experimented on. I don't remember Sexus. She looked back at him, her expression tight. But if I'm in their system, then they must have. She cut herself off, her jaw tightening. Damon didn't need her to finish the sentence. They must have done something to her. And the worst part, she didn't even know what. Damon leaned forward, tapping a command into the console, attempting to decrypt more of the file. But whoever had locked it down had done a damn good job. The rest of the document was a mess of redacted data and high-level security encryption. He could probably break through it given time, but time was the one thing they didn't have. They called you a hybrid, he said, scanning what little information he could access. Velaran, he turned toward her. Is that where you're from? Lyra hesitated. I don't know, I don't remember. Damon studied her, his mind running through the possibilities. Velara wasn't a name he heard often, if at all. That meant one of two things. Either it was a small backwater planet that didn't have much interaction with the wider galaxy, or it was something far more secretive. And considering Sexus was involved, he was willing to bet on the latter. We need more information, he muttered, pushing away from the console and standing. And I know exactly where to get it. Lyra looked up at him. Where? Damon turned to the ship's nav controls, inputting a set of coordinates. Zed Marrow, he said. Her ears twitched slightly. Who? Damon let out a dry chuckle, though there wasn't much humor in it. An information broker, and a damn good one. He leaned against the console. If there's anyone in the galaxy who can dig into Sexus's secrets, it's him. Lyra didn't answer right away, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. Can you trust him? Damon sighed. That was a complicated question, not even a little. Lyra frowned. Then why? Because he's a cowardly bastard, Damon interrupted. And cowards don't take unnecessary risks. He won't try to screw us unless he thinks there's zero chance of it backfiring on him. Lyra seemed to consider that for a long moment before finally nodding. All right, if he can help, then let's go. Damon didn't waste another second. He locked in the hyperspace coordinates and punched the throttle forward, sending the black arrow keening through the void at light speed. The moment they dropped out of hyperspace, Damon's stomach twisted with familiar discomfort. The place hadn't changed. Narrow Station, a crumbling black market hub built into the ruins of a long-forgotten orbital colony. It was the kind of place where you could find anything, as long as you didn't mind dealing with the kind of people who sold anything. Damon maneuvered the ship into the station's docking bay, engaging the security locks as the engines powered down. Stay close, he said as he stood, grabbing his sidearm from its holster. Lyra followed silently, though he could feel the tension radiating off her. This wasn't the kind of place someone like her belonged. Hell, it wasn't the kind of place anyone should belong.